So think about it like this. If you break an arm, the X-ray shows this jagged white line, right? It's totally binary.
Yeah, you know exactly what's wrong.
Exactly, and the doctor knows exactly how to fix it. But when you step onto the floor of a massive church convention, specifically the 2026 LCMS Convention, to debate, organizational governance and mercy work, there's no pristine X-ray machine.
No, not at all. It's incredibly murky.
Right. You're stepping into this legislative landscape that is just messy. You're dealing with human lives, community crises, massive institutional structures, and, well, millions of dollars. And it all collides at a single microphone.
It really does. It's a lot of pressure.
So today, we are taking a deep dive specifically into Floor Committee 3, Mercy. And our goal here is to arm you, the delegate, with the exact analytical tools and, the actual amendments you need to cut through the bureaucracy and just do your job on the floor.
And it is a daunting task, honestly, for anyone walking into that hall. I mean, Floor Committee 3 is arguably one of the most hands-on, practical committees at this entire convention.
Oh, absolutely.
You're looking at a slate of resolutions that touch on everything from disaster response to the opioid addiction crisis, foster care, mental health for church workers. I mean, these are not just abstract theological debates.
Right. These are real life and death issues.
Exactly. These are resolutions that dictate how thousands of congregations will or maybe won't respond to actual human suffering over the next 3 years.
And that is exactly why this deep dive is custom tailored for you. You're packing your bags, you're looking at this staggering amount of reading material, and you're just trying to figure out what actually matters.
Which is a lot of reading, by the way.
So much reading. So to help you do that, we are operating out of a very specific stack of source materials today.
Yeah.
We've got Today's Business, Issue 1, the official convention workbook, and this highly specialized Committee 3 amendment guide that's been circulating to help delegates navigate these exact muddy waters.
And that stack is essential because it moves way beyond just, summarizing what the resolutions say. It tells you how to critically evaluate the machinery behind them.
Yeah, like looking under the hood.
Right. It helps you spot the hidden legislative pitfalls, the unfunded mandates, and honestly, most importantly, it gives you the exact parliamentary language to amend these resolutions on the floor to make them actually functional.
Before we get into the actual text, though, I think we need to lay down one very clear ground rule for this deep dive.
Good call.
Because we are dealing with Floor Committee 3. We're going to be touching on topics like life ministry, abortion, adoption, societal crises. And these are themes that absolutely dominate cable news, right? They're huge in political campaigns.
Oh, yeah. Very charged.
Right. But we need to be completely transparent here. We take absolutely no political sides. Not left, not right, not center. Our goal is not to endorse any specific political viewpoint or candidate at all.
Yeah, that's not what this is about.
We are merely here to impartially report and unpack the ideas and the theology contained in the original LCMS source material. We're basically your strategy team, helping you understand the text so you can govern effectively.
That is exactly right. We are just looking at the legislative mechanics here. We're asking, does this resolution do what it claims to do? And is the local church actually equipped to execute it?
So let's establish the overarching framework required to evaluate these resolutions. The amendment guide sources provide a really specific diagnostic lens for this convention, and they call it the Kingdom over Castle framework.
Kingdom over castle. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, it's catchy. But if I'm a delegate sitting in the gallery, how do I actually apply this concept to a piece of legislation?
Well, you have to start by recognizing the natural gravity of any massive institution.
Right.
The LCMS, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, is this massive network of over 6,000 congregations.
Oh, yeah, huge.
And the institutional urge of anybody that size is to just build unnecessary centralized control. That is castle thinking.
Okay, so building walls, keeping things inside.
Exactly. When you're reading a resolution, castle thinking looks like vague implementation plans. It looks like unfunded mandates.
Wait, define unfunded mandate for me, just so we're crystal clear.
Sure. It's when the National Synod tells districts or local churches that they absolutely must do something, but they provide $0 to actually accomplish it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's rough.
It's terrible. It's symbolic language that makes everyone in the convention hall feel great, but it results in absolutely zero local action.
I've seen that happen at local city council meetings. A politician passes a resolution declaring, a citywide day of wellness.
Right, everyone claps.
Exactly. Everyone claps, they take a photo, and the next day, literally nothing has fundamentally changed because there was no budget, No staff,
Yeah.
no mechanism for action. It was just a castle made of paper.
Precisely. It's building walls, centralizing power, and creating this illusion of work. Kingdom thinking, on the other hand, well, it operates on the fundamental premise that the Synod does not exist to build itself up.
Okay, so it's outward-facing.
Yes. The national structure exists to serve the local congregations, the regional districts, the church workers, and the families. It's a mindset of mission that deeply respects local context. The operating mantra for kingdom thinking is low control with high accountability.
Okay, stop right there, because low control with high accountability,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds like corporate speak,
Yeah.
like a synergy buzzword.
I know it does.
How does that actually function in a church governance setting? I mean, if you have low control, how on earth do you enforce the accountability?
Well, it functions through transparency rather than micromanagement. High accountability doesn't mean some bureaucrat in St. Louis is checking a local pastor's daily calendar.
Right, that would be a nightmare.
Exactly. High accountability means the local congregation or district has to report on the outcomes of their work. They have to answer the question like, what did you actually do with the resources you were given?
Oh, I see.
And low control means the national office doesn't dictate exactly how the local church does it, because an urban church in Chicago has entirely different operational realities than, a rural church in North Dakota.
Oh, for sure. Totally different worlds.
Right, but both still have to show their work. That's the accountability part.
That makes a ton of sense. And that leads directly into the engine of this entire framework. Because to execute this kingdom mindset, the sources introduce the stewardship of the 5 capitals.
The 5 capitals, yes.
And when I first read this in the materials, I was skeptical. I thought, great, more buzzwords. But they are actually incredibly specific diagnostic tools.
They really are.
Let's walk through these, because every delegate listening needs to have these memorized before they step to a microphone. Break them down for me.
Okay, I agree. They're essential. The first is spiritual capital. Now, in a church context, this is the absolute bedrock. It includes the word, the sacraments, prayer, confession, absolution, catechesis, which is basically just formal theological instruction and pastoral care. If a resolution does not release spiritual capital, then the church is really just operating as a secular, non-governmental organization, an NGO.
Right, like if we were just handing out bread without the gospel, we're a food bank, not a church.
Exactly.
But the second one is where it gets highly practical.
Yeah.
Relational capital. What is that?
Relational capital is fundamentally about trust. It's the network of partnerships. It's the trust between a congregation and its local neighborhood. I mean, it includes the families, the volunteers, the relationships with local community agencies like the police or social services.
Oh, okay. Like networking almost.
Yes, and the trust between church workers and their district presidents. Because you can have all the funding in the world, but if the local community does not trust your congregation, your mercy ministry will fail before it even starts.
Wow, that's so true. And then we get to the brick and mortar. The third is physical capital.
Right.
We are talking about tangible assets here. The church facilities, the actual food pantries, shelters, specialized disaster response tools like chainsaws and skid steers, counseling spaces, technology, and transportation. I mean, minivans are physical capital.
They absolutely are. And then the fourth one is intellectual capital, which is honestly often the most overlooked by well-meaning volunteers.
Wait, really? Overlooked how?
Well, this is the know-how. It involves specialized training. It involves legal clarity, which, by the way, is going to be massive when we discuss telehealth resolutions later on.
Oh, I bet.
It includes trauma awareness, theological guidance, counseling knowledge, addiction recovery wisdom. It's basically the expertise required to ensure that your mercy work doesn't accidentally cause more harm.
I'm going to hold you to that, because I definitely want to dig into how a church acquires that kind of clinical know-how without crossing boundaries.
We definitely will.
But let's hit the last one. Financial capital. This is the one everyone fights over at conventions, right?
Oh, always.
It includes benevolence funds, which is, the discretionary money a church uses to directly help people in crisis, as well as grants, emergency aid, insurance, counseling support, scholarships, and sustainable funding models.
So when you are on the floor holding a piece of legislation, you use these 5 capitals as your X-ray machine.
I like that analogy.
You look at the text and you ask, does this resolution release spiritual, relational, physical, intellectual, or financial capital to the local level?
If it doesn't.
If you cannot pinpoint exactly which capital is being released and how it is being released, well, what's fascinating here is that the resolution is likely just building a castle. It's an empty statement.
Wow. Okay, I want to apply this framework right away. If we look at the stack of resolutions, the very first one up for debate is about life ministry. This is Resolution 301.
Yes, 301.
Now, in the LCMS, pro-life resolutions are incredibly common. They pass them almost every convention. Looking at today's business, Issue 1, the text commends and encourages the life ministry efforts of congregations, schools, districts, and recognized service organizations.
RSOs.
Right, and for the delegate listening who might be new to that term, an RSO is essentially an independent nonprofit or charity that is formally recognized to operate alongside the church.
Correct.
So the resolution emphasizes the sanctity of life, from conception to natural death, and it quotes Job and the Psalms. It's very thorough.
And the theology is airtight. It really is. The main mercy and mission opportunity here is to take that very clear, historic pro-life confession and connect it with concrete, local, boots-on-the-ground care across the entire human lifespan.
But I'm looking at this text, and if I'm a delegate, I'm worried this is just symbolic posturing. Like, why shouldn't I just vote this down as a waste of time? What is the actual risk here?
You have correctly identified the castle thinking risk. Because
Okay.
the danger is making a loud public pro-life statement without providing the actual pro-life care required to support families in crisis.
Right. All talk, no action.
Exactly. If the Synod passes a resolution that simply says, you know, we are pro-life, but does not actively equip the local parish to help a terrified pregnant teenager, or a father who just lost his job, or an elderly woman facing end-of-life decisions totally alone in a nursing home, then it is a hollow castle. It is cheap talk.
This is where the Committee 3 Amendment Guide steps in, right?
Yes.
The guide suggests an amendment that forces the resolution out of the theological clouds and down into the local parish. It wants to add language that explicitly connects advocacy with concrete local mercy. And it specifically demands that the resources created by the national office be usable by small entities.
And that last part is so critical. I mean, think about it. A sprawling, highly produced, really expensive program designed for a megachurch in Texas is completely useless to a church of 45 people in rural Montana.
Yeah, they don't have the staff for that.
I don't have the staff, the budget, the physical space, nothing.
Let's read the exact improved amendment wording from the sources, because the delegate needs to have this ready for the microphone.
Okay, let's hear it.
It says, I'm quoting here, resolved, that congregations, schools, districts, and recognized service organizations be encouraged to connect life ministry advocacy with concrete local mercy, including support for pregnant mothers, fathers, children, families in crisis, those grieving abortion, people with disabilities, the elderly, and those facing end-of-life decisions, and be it further resolved that life ministry resources be shared in ways usable by small congregations, schools, youth groups, and families.
See, look at the mechanics of that amendment. It preserves low control and high accountability perfectly.
How so?
Because it does not dictate a centralized, one-size-fits-all program from headquarters. Instead, it names specific demographics: mothers, fathers, the disabled, the elderly, and challenges the local church to look at its own community.
Oh, I get it, because communities are so different.
Right. A congregation in Florida might have a massive demographic of elderly people needing end-of-life advocacy, while a congregation right next to a university might be dealing mostly with crisis pregnancies.
So it gives them permission to focus on their actual context.
Exactly.
Let's run this through our X-ray machine. How does this amended version actually release the 5 capitals locally?
Well, spiritually, it releases capital through robust pastoral teaching on the sanctity of life across the whole spectrum, not just at birth.
Okay, that makes sense.
Physically, it translates into tangible spaces. It looks like congregations dedicating a spare room to set up a diaper closet, or gathering baby supplies, organizing meal trains for struggling families, or providing free, safe space in their building for grief support groups.
I have to say, a diaper closet is such a perfect example of physical capital. It takes this really high-level theological debate and just grounds it in a very physical reality. It basically says, we value life, and to prove it, here are some diapers so you can afford to put gas in your car this week.
That's exactly what it says.
What about financial capital? How does that play in here?
Financially, it encourages churches to intentionally direct their benevolence funds toward mothers, to set up financial support systems for couples trying to navigate the incredibly expensive adoption process, or to provide localized pregnancy care grants.
Okay, so if I'm a delegate
Right.
and I want this amendment passed, how do I actually execute this on the floor?
Right.
Because it is super intimidating to stand up in front of thousands of people at a mic.
Oh, for sure. It's nerve-wracking.
Right.
But you keep it clean and formal. You wait your turn at the microphone, you address the chair calmly, and you say, and you can write this down, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 3001 by adding language that connects life advocacy with concrete local mercy for mothers, fathers, children, families in crisis, people with disabilities, the elderly, and those facing end-of-life decisions.
Just that simple.
Just that simple. You don't need to preach a sermon. Let the words of the amendment do the heavy lifting for you.
And before you even get to the microphone, when you're sitting at your table with your fellow delegates discussing this, your huddled question to focus the group is simple. You just ask, does this resolution help our congregations move from pro-life statements to pro-life care?
Yep.
And if it does, you vote yes.
And that actually leads naturally into the next massive issue, because if a church is successful in advocating for life and supporting women through crisis pregnancies, the immediate ripple effect is going to be an influx of children who desperately need homes.
Exactly. You cannot advocate for birth without advocating for the child's entire life. And that brings us to Resolution 302, which covers adoption and fostering.
Right. This is where the rubber really meets the road for congregational mercy.
Let's give the plain language summary for Resolution 302 from the Convention Workbook. It basically promotes awareness of Christian adoption and fostering needs. The text highlights this staggering statistic. Something like 117,000 children are currently awaiting adoption.
It's a huge number.
It encourages districts and congregations to raise awareness, to support adoption-focused RSOs, and it frames this entire effort beautifully as an expression of our own baptismal adoption into God's family. We were adopted by Christ, therefore we adopt others.
Theologically, that connection is profound. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But practically, the main mercy and mission opportunity here is moving a congregation beyond mere awareness into practical, hands-on, long-term support.
Because, let's be honest, awareness is incredibly easy.
So easy.
Everyone with a smartphone is aware that the foster care system is overwhelmed. So I'm looking for the castle thinking risk here. Is the risk that we just print a bunch of brochures and call it a day?
Yes, that is exactly the risk. Stopping at awareness. Awareness is the starting gun. It is not the finish line. The incredible danger in church culture is leaving foster and adoptive families totally isolated after the initial placement.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about it. Imagine a family stands up in church on Sunday and announces, "We are fostering a child." The whole congregation applauds.
Everyone's so happy.
Everyone is thrilled. But 3 months later, when that family is dealing with severe behavioral issues, sleep deprivation, navigating social workers, and just endless legal red tape, the applause has completely faded.
Because the church just kind of forgets?
Exactly. The church has moved on, and that family is drowning. That is a systemic failure of relational capital.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it's a reality for so many foster parents. The burnout rate is astronomical. So we turn to our amendment guide for 302. The suggested amendment focuses heavily on inserting practical congregational care into the text, specifically listing things like respite care, meals, and mentoring.
I cannot praise this suggested amendment enough because it forces the church to acknowledge that the grinding, exhausting work of mercy begins after the placement is made, not before.
So true. Here is the improved amendment wording for the delegate to take to the floor. It says, "Resolved that congregations and schools be encouraged to support adoption and fostering not only through awareness, but also through practical congregational care, including prayer, respite care, meals, mentoring, trauma-informed support, financial assistance where appropriate, and partnership with confessionally faithful adoption and foster care ministries."
Now, notice how that empowers the local congregation to build a support network based entirely on its specific capacity.
Right, going back to low control.
Exactly. A small rural church might not have the budget to offer a $10,000 adoption grant, but they absolutely have the capacity to organize a schedule to drop off casseroles twice a week.
Right.
Or to offer respite care, which, if people don't know, just means watching the kids for 3 hours on a Saturday so the foster parents can take a nap or go to the grocery store alone.
Oh my gosh, that would be a lifesaver. Let's run this through the capitals. Spiritually, we're teaching the theology of baptismal adoption and praying for these specific children by name during the service.
Yes.
Relationally, we're building actual sport teams around these families so they don't burn out.
Yeah.
But I want to zero in on the intellectual capital here because the amendment mentions trauma-informed support.
This is a crucial piece of intellectual capital. It calls for trauma-informed training for pastors, teachers, and volunteers who interact with these kids.
Wait, I have to push back hard on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Trauma-informed support sounds like highly clinical, secular jargon. I mean, are we expecting our parish pastors or a volunteer Sunday school teacher to suddenly become licensed therapists?
No, not at all.
Because if a Sunday school teacher tries to diagnose a child's psychological trauma, isn't the church opening itself up to massive liability? That seems like a huge overreach.
That is an excellent pushback, and it is exactly why the intellectual capital constraint is so important to understand here. Intellectual capital here means awareness and knowing your boundaries.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It means knowing when to partner with outside professionals. Being trauma-informed does not mean the Sunday school teacher is conducting psychoanalysis. It simply means the teacher understands that when a foster child suddenly throws a chair across the room, they aren't necessarily just being a bad kid.
Oh, I see.
They might be experiencing a trauma trigger from their past abuse.
Okay, so it changes the reaction from mere discipline to actual compassion.
Exactly. It means the pastor knows how to listen, provide deep spiritual care, and then hand the family a referral to a licensed professional. It's about staying in your lane while being deeply supportive. Ironically, a lack of trauma awareness is a much bigger liability because that's when volunteers mishandle fragile situations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about knowing your limits and having the intellectual capital to recognize what you don't know. So if I'm the delegate, my microphone phrase is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 302 by adding practical congregational support for foster and adoptive families, including prayer, respite care, meals, mentoring, trauma-informed support, and financial assistance where appropriate.
Perfect. And when you are debating this at your table, your huddle question is, does this amendment help congregations support families after the first announcement when the real work begins?
Okay, let's unpack this. We spent a lot of time on individual family crises. But what happens when the crisis is not isolated to one family, but strikes an entire town or like an entire regional district?
That's a whole different scale.
Right. And that brings us to Resolution 303, which focuses on disaster response.
This is an area where the LCMS has historically been very strong. They have a massive footprint in disaster response, but this resolution proposes a structural shift that needs very careful attention from delegates.
Let's do the plain language summary. Resolution 303 essentially gives thanks to God for the work of LCMS disaster response. And the statistics in the workbook are amazing, actually. In the past 3 years, they provided over $3.4 million in relief grants and mobilized over 6,600 volunteers.
Incredible numbers.
But here is the critical legislative move. The resolution requires each of the 35 regional districts to appoint a disaster response coordinator, and it encourages ongoing LERT training. For the listener, LERT stands for Lutheran Early Response Teams. These are the folks in the neon green shirts with the chainsaws who show up after a tornado.
The main Mercy opportunity here is structural. It's about creating robust readiness and reporting across the entire country so that when a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast or a wildfire hits California, the church isn't scrambling to figure out who is in charge.
But the word requires in a synodical resolution always sets off alarm bells for me.
It should.
I immediately think of the castle thinking risk. What happens when a national body mandates a regional body to do something?
Well, you get an unfunded mandate. That is the massive risk here. The mandate to appoint a district coordinator could very easily become a hollow bureaucratic exercise.
How so? Like they just don't do it.
Or they fake it. Imagine a district president who doesn't have the budget to hire a full-time coordinator. So to comply with this resolution, he just points to a random administrative assistant on his staff and says, congratulations, you are the new disaster coordinator.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just adding a title to an email signature.
Exactly. It checks a compliance box for St. Louis, but it produces zero actual readiness on the ground. There's no funding attached, no accountability, and no follow-up on volunteer capacity. It's literally building a castle of paperwork.
So the amendment guide steps in to fix this. It doesn't remove the requirement, but it suggests adding a requirement for an annual readiness update and a massive 2029 summary report. But wait, why is more reporting a good thing? Doesn't that just add to the paperwork we were just complaining about?
I get why it sounds like that, but because it forces transparency, it's different. Without this amendment, the requirement to have a coordinator is totally toothless. With the amendment, it ensures the requirement actually produces tangible data and readiness. It forces the district to actually measure its capacity.
Okay, I see. Here is the improved amendment wording for the floor. Resolved, that each district disaster response coordinator, in collaboration with LCMS disaster response, be encouraged to provide an annual readiness update to the district identifying training offered, congregations engaged, volunteer capacity, partnerships formed, and any major needs for improved disaster readiness. And be it further resolved that LCMS disaster response be encouraged to provide a summary before the 2029 Convention of District Coordinator Coverage, LERT training participation, volunteer service hours where available, and lessons learned from recent disaster responses.
See, this is a textbook example of low control and high accountability.
Yeah, I can see that.
It does not tell the district president who to hire, how much to pay them, or exactly how to run their local response. That's low control. But it does say, you have to tell us what you did, who you trained, and what you learned. That is high accountability.
Want to look at how this releases capitals? Physical capital is pretty obvious here. It's the tracking and deployment of specialized disaster equipment. The sources mentioned the Synod already has over 80 pieces of specialized equipment, trailers, generators, heavy machinery.
Huge physical capital.
But the intellectual capital aspect of this amendment is fascinating to me, specifically the phrase, lessons learned.
I love that you caught that. That phrase is perhaps the most important two words in the amendment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because by collecting data on lessons learned across 35 districts, you are aggregating intellectual capital. If a district in Florida makes a critical logistical mistake during a hurricane, maybe they staged their supply trucks too close to the flood zone, they put that failure in their annual report. The national office aggregates it, and suddenly a district in Texas doesn't have to make that same expensive mistake during their next hurricane. The data collection actually prevents future disasters from being as devastating.
It's the ultimate kingdom-building collaboration. It leverages the massive size of the Synod to actually benefit the local response on the ground.
So, your microphone phrase as a delegate is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 303 by adding annual district readiness updates and a 2029 summary of coordinator coverage, alert participation, volunteer service hours where available, and lessons learned.
And your huddle question before you go up there is, does this amendment create actual readiness, or does it just create a spreadsheet of names?
All right. We have been talking about disasters striking communities. But there's another kind of toll, right? The quiet, accumulating toll that constant ministry takes on the workers themselves. The burnout, the stress, the isolation. And this brings us to Resolution 304, which addresses counseling and telehealth for church workers.
This is a major pivot in the committee's work. We are moving from caring for the flock to caring for the shepherds. And out of all the resolutions in Committee 3, the source documents flag this one as one of the most consequential, high-priority items you will vote on.
Why is that?
Because it proposes significant, costly new initiatives.
Let's look at the plain language summary. Resolution 304 encourages the use of counseling and telehealth services for church workers, which is fantastic. Post-COVID, clergy burnout is at an all-time high.
Oh, absolutely.
But then the resolution directs a feasibility study for a possible Synod-wide telehealth counseling network involving the Office of National Mission and Concordia Plan Services, which is the church's benefits provider.
Right. And the main mercy opportunity is obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are facing a severe retention crisis. Pastors and teachers are leaving the ministry because their mental health is shattered. Providing critical mental health support is essential to keeping them healthy.
But the castle thinking risk here is flashing bright red. I mean, if I am a delegate, I am looking at a Synod-wide telehealth network and seeing a massive bureaucratic black hole. What are the specific risks we are looking at here?
The risks are staggering. First, you are looking at the risk of creating a massive, vague, and incredibly expensive centralized system without a clear mandate.
Yeah.
Second, telehealth is an absolute legal minefield. The risks include inadvertently ignoring state licensing laws.
Explain how that works, because I think a lot of people just assume Zoom makes geography totally irrelevant. Like, why can't the national office just hire a bunch of counselors in St. Louis and send a Zoom link to every pastor in the country?
Because healthcare is highly regulated at the state level. A therapist licensed in Missouri cannot legally treat a pastor living in California over Zoom without jumping through massive regulatory hoops.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Right. Furthermore, imagine a crisis scenario. A therapist in Missouri is on a telehealth call with a church worker in California, and that worker becomes suicidal.
Oh my gosh.
The Missouri therapist does not know the local California involuntary hold procedures. They don't have relationships with local California emergency responders.
Yeah.
If something tragic happens, Who is liable? The therapist, the synod, the local church. It is a legal and ethical nightmare.
Wow.
Not to mention the massive clinical privacy and HIPAA concerns of running medical data through church servers.
And there's a financial risk, too, right? What about the church workers who are not enrolled in Concordia plan services?
Huge issue.
Because a lot of smaller churches can't afford the synodical health plan, so their workers are on their spouse's plan or the state exchange. Does this synod-wide system just leave them out in the cold?
Exactly. So a feasibility study is a necessary idea, but a study without strict guardrails is basically just a blank check for bureaucrats to build a massive castle.
Right.
The amendment guide focuses heavily on ensuring this feasibility study is comprehensive and tightly constrained.
Here is the improved amendment wording our listener needs to take to the mic. We want to require the feasibility study to explicitly address state licensing, confidentiality, emergency response, affordability, access for non-CPS workers, projected costs, and possible service models before the 2029 convention.
And this is the ultimate low-control, high-accountability move. It forces the study to be legally, medically, and financially rigorous before anyone starts pouring concrete, so to speak, on a centralized infrastructure.
You want to know what you're buying.
Exactly. It says, do the homework, prove it is safe, prove it is legal, prove we can afford it, and then bring it back to us in 3 years.
Looking at the 5 capitals, this amendment heavily protects intellectual capital by demanding clinical training, legal guidance, and clear suicide prevention protocols for telehealth emergencies. And it fiercely protects financial capital by demanding transparent projected costs and insurance coordination. We just cannot guess on this.
We absolutely cannot guess. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the liability for the church is immense, not to mention the tragic pastoral failure if a crisis is mishandled just because a centralized system didn't know the local laws.
Listener, mark this one down. This is high priority. Your microphone phrase is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 304 by requiring the feasibility study to address licensing, confidentiality, emergency response, affordability, access for non-CPS workers, projected costs, and possible service models before the 2029 convention.
And your delegation huddle question is, does this amendment protect workers and families while preventing a well-intended program from becoming legally or financially disastrous?
Now, telehealth and emergency counseling, those are acute care. They are what you need when you are in an active crisis. But how do we foster long-term, sustainable health so that our church workers don't reach that breaking point in the first place?
Right, getting ahead of it.
That is Resolution 305, Worker Wellness.
This resolution shifts our perspective from emergency psychological triage to everyday, sustainable, kind of boring health for workers.
The plain language summary for Resolution 305 is, well, pretty thin. It essentially commends efforts to serve worker wellness and encourages participation in Concordia Plan services. The sources note this is largely a commendatory routine item. Everyone votes yes because who is going to vote against wellness?
No one. But the main Mercy opportunity is to completely reframe how the local congregation views worker care. We need to move it from crisis response to ordinary proactive stewardship.
The castle thinking risk is treating this resolution as just a vague thank you or a symbolic pat on the back. If the convention just says, hey, thanks for being healthy, keep up the good work, without any concrete follow-through, we leave struggling workers behind.
Absolutely.
I mean, what does a compensation review actually look like in a standard voters meeting? Usually it's just a finance committee looking at a spreadsheet and saying, hey, can we afford a 2% cost of living increase this year?
Right. And that is a massive failure of relational and financial capital. The suggested amendment turns this symbolic pat on the back into a practical, actionable checklist. It adds an annual review requirement for congregations that goes way beyond just a base salary check.
Let me read the improved wording. Resolved, that congregations, schools, and ministries be encouraged to review worker compensation, health coverage, wellness resources, counseling access, and family support at least annually, and be it further resolved that available worker wellness resources be communicated in simple and accessible formats for congregational leaders, boards, and workers.
This applies our framework perfectly. It does not mandate what the compensation must be, because that would be high control, which we want to avoid, but it places the responsibility exactly where it belongs.
On the local level.
Yes. On the local boards and congregations to review their specific workers' holistic health annually.
It is the difference between buying your pastor a gym membership after he has a major heart attack versus giving him the time, the budget, and the schedule flexibility to actually exercise and rest every single week. We want to be in the business of preventing the heart attack.
Precisely. And in terms of the five capitals, this relies heavily on relational capital fostering peer care, providing family support so the worker doesn't feel isolated from their spouse and kids because they are always, always at the church.
Right.
And financial capital is obvious here, actually reviewing compensation, making sure the health coverage is adequate, checking the retirement contributions, and ensuring they have disability insurance so a single injury doesn't bankrupt their family.
So if you want to push this proactive approach forward, your microphone phrase is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 305 by encouraging annual review of worker compensation, health coverage, wellness resources, counseling access, and family support, and by asking that worker wellness resources be communicated clearly to congregational leaders and workers.
And ask your delegation, does this move worker wellness from a crisis response to ordinary, everyday stewardship?
Okay, moving on. When wellness fails and deep societal crises emerge, the church has to deal with the fallout. And next, we are tackling what might be the most devastating societal issue impacting the church today. Resolution 306 deals with the addiction crisis.
The sources flag this alongside the telehealth resolution as one of the most consequential items for Floor Committee 3. It bridges the health of the individual with the health of the broader community facing the opioid, fentanyl, and broader addiction epidemic.
The plain language summary. It directs an investigation into how churches can support addiction recovery, encourages district partnerships, and calls the Synod to prayer.
And the main mercy opportunity is monumental. It is about equipping local congregations to be actual hubs of mercy in the middle of a profound societal crisis. Addiction is destroying families in every single zip code, rural, urban, wealthy, poor, and the church has to be equipped to respond.
But the castle thinking risk here terrifies me. The risk is confusing pastoral care with clinical treatment. It is the immense danger of a local congregation, or even a well-meaning pastor, taking on medical roles without any actual clinical expertise.
The amendment guide insists on distinguishing the types of care very clearly, and it explains why blurring the lines between a pastor and a clinical rehab center is incredibly dangerous. A pastor is not a medical detox specialist.
I want to really dig into this because a lot of people might think, well, shouldn't a pastor be the primary caregiver for someone in their flock struggling with addiction? Like, why do we need to distinguish the care?
This raises an important question about the limits of pastoral care. For their soul, yes, the pastor is the primary caregiver. For their physical detox, absolutely not. Think about the theology of absolution, the pronouncement of the forgiveness of sins. Absolution cures the spiritual guilt. It restores the relationship with God. But an absolution does not stop the physical, biological reality of fentanyl withdrawal.
Well, yeah.
If a church tries to run a recovery ministry that treats addiction as merely a spiritual failing that can be prayed away, while ignoring the severe medical reality of chemical dependency, people could literally die.
So what does this all mean for the amendment?
The improved amendment wording explicitly ensures that the investigation distinguishes between pastoral care, clinical treatment, peer recovery support, and congregational mercy. Furthermore, it mandates consultation with qualified professionals and congregations that are already successfully serving in addiction recovery.
This is crucial for low control and high accountability. It fiercely protects pastoral boundaries. It ensures the pastor is doing what only the pastor can do, delivering the gospel. And it holds the synod accountable to rely on actual professional expertise rather than just guessing or, like you said, spiritualizing a profound medical crisis. So how does this release the capitals?
Spiritually, it keeps the focus on word and sacrament. But intellectually, the church must possess addiction recovery wisdom and maintain crystal clear legal and clinical boundaries.
And
Relationally,
it means partnering with local agencies, medical facilities, and licensed professionals rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and build an amateur, dangerous, church-run rehab facility. The church provides the soul care, the professionals provide the medical care, and they partner together.
that distinction is so vital. Delegate listener, your microphone phrase is, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 306 to ensure the investigation distinguishes between a pastoral care, clinical treatment, and peer recovery and explicitly consults qualified professionals and congregations already serving in addiction recovery.
And your huddle question, does this resolution preserve professional boundaries and protect pastoral care while addressing the crisis? We are on the home stretch of the resolutions. Let's zoom out from specific crises to the broader picture of how congregations deliver mercy every single day. Resolution 307 covers congregational mercy ministries.
This is really the culmination of all these efforts. It is about multiplying everyday mercy at the local level.
The plain language summary is very simple. It gives thanks to God for congregations engaging in mercy ministries.
The mission opportunity is helping those faithful mercy ministries multiply locally. If a church in Ohio has figured out a brilliant model for a community food pantry that truly serves their neighborhood, how do we help a church in Indiana replicate that success?
But again, the castle thinking risk is vague thanksgiving. It is reducing the church's mercy to mere secular social service, or, on the flip side, making evangelism purely transactional.
What do you mean by transactional evangelism in this context?
Transactional evangelism is when a church operates a mercy ministry with strings attached. We will give you this bag of groceries, or we will help you pay your heating bill, but only if you sit in our sanctuary and listen to a 20-minute sermon first.
Oh, right.
It turns the mercy of Christ into a commodity to be traded for church attendance.
And on the other extreme, you have the social gospel, where the church just becomes a generic food distribution center and completely abandons the proclamation of the gospel.
Right.
The amendment review focuses on sharing practical models that avoid both extremes. Showcasing how congregations do this faithfully is far better than just passing a resolution thanking them for it.
The improved amendment wording seeks to ensure that shared practical models keep bodily care directly connected to pastoral care and congregational life, without reducing mercy to social service alone or making evangelism transactional.
This highlights and distributes local working models rather than imposing a top-down program from St. Louis. It releases spiritual capital by keeping word and sacrament central to the community's identity, while releasing physical capital through things like food pantries and community space.
Microphone phrase. Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 307 to ensure shared practical models keep bodily care connected to pastoral care and congregational life, without reducing mercy to social service.
And the huddle question. Does this help faithful mercy ministries actually multiply locally?
Okay, we have dug deep into the specifics of all 7 resolutions. Now it is time to step back and look at the forest, not just the trees. When you are sitting in that convention hall, listening to endless debate, how do you evaluate the key themes across Committee 3?
You need a thematic gauntlet. You need a checklist that you can run any piece of legislation through.
Let's do a rapid-fire evaluation based on the critical thematic questions provided in our source guide. Listener, imagine running every resolution through this mental checklist before you vote. 1. Do these resolutions help congregations deliver Christ's mercy locally, or do they hoard power nationally?
Right.
2. Do they preserve clear Lutheran confession while allowing faithful local flexibility? 3. Do they strengthen mercy without creating unnecessary bureaucracy? 4. Do they include accountability, reporting, and practical next steps? And 5. Do they protect confidentiality, pastoral care, and professional boundaries where needed?
My synthesis of the source material is this. Without the proposed amendments we just discussed, many of these resolutions risk failing these tests. They risk drifting into castle building, creating unfunded mandates and vague statements. But with these precise, targeted amendments, they successfully release the spiritual, relational, physical, intellectual, and financial capitals. They empower small, rural, and urban congregations alike. They keep Christ and the gospel absolutely central, rather than inadvertently creating a centralized, bureaucratic mercy control tower.
A centralized mercy control tower is exactly what we want to avoid. This brings us to our final segment, the ultimate delegate cheat sheet. We are equipping you with the exact strategic tools you need when you step up to that microphone.
First, we need a ranked list of the most important amendments to prioritize, because floor time is always limited. The chairman will eventually call the question and debate will end. You have to know what matters most.
Exactly. High priority items are Resolution 304 on telehealth and 306 on addiction. Why? Because they propose significant new initiatives, potentially massive synodical costs, and highly complex governance, liability, and medical boundaries. If you only get to the mic twice during the entire convention, go for these. Medium priority items are 301 on life and 302 on adoption. These are crucial because they require moving the church culture from mere awareness and symbolic statements into actual, practical, messy congregational care.
It is equally vital to know what not to amend. The sources are clear on unnecessary amendments. I strongly advise against amending a resolution simply for rhetorical polish.
What does that look like on the floor?
It looks like a delegate standing up, walking to the microphone, and spending 3 minutes arguing that the word encourage should be changed to exhort, simply because they think it sounds more theological.
Oh, please don't do that.
Right. Stay in your seat. Resolutions 305 and 307 are largely commendatory. Do not add bureaucratic process simply because process feels safe to you. The goal of the convention is accountable mission, not generating paperwork confetti.
Now for the crown jewel of our guide, the Master Amendment paragraph. The sources provide a Swiss Army knife amendment that you can adapt for almost any resolution if things get confusing on the floor and you need to rein in a runaway piece of legislation.
Listen to this one closely.
Resolved that implementation of this resolution be carried out in a way that strengthens local congregational mercy, honors district and congregational context, protects confidentiality where needed, encourages partnership with confessionally faithful ministries and qualified professionals, and provides a brief report before the 2029 convention describing resources created, partnerships formed, congregations served, 5 capitals stewarded, and lessons learned.
That paragraph is a masterpiece of kingdom thinking. It covers local context, it enforces professional boundaries, and it demands a strict report on the 5 capitals and lessons learned. If a resolution is spiraling into castle building, drop that amendment on it.
Finally, let's give you a quick one-page floor cheat sheet on the actual psychology and parliamentary procedure of the microphone. When you address the chairman, keep it formal, clean, and calm. Your goal is not to win an argument or score debate points. Your goal is to help the assembly do faithful work.
Yeah.
If you are speaking for or against something, you say, Mr. Chairman, I rise in favor or opposition to resolution.
And if you are moving an amendment,
You say, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Resolution 3 blank by adding the following resolved.
and when you speak for your amendment, keep it brief. Say something like, this amendment strengthens local mercy while preserving accountability.
The psychology of the microphone is critical. You only have a couple of minutes. Do not give a 10-minute sermon.
Please don't.
Do not try to impress everyone with your theological vocabulary. State the problem, offer the solution, and sit down. Restraint at the microphone builds immense relational capital with your fellow delegates. If they trust you are not there to waste their time, they will listen to your amendments. Let the words do the plowing.
Exactly.
Listener, we have unpacked the blueprints. We have waded through the murky legislative waters of convention resolutions. We have debated unfunded mandates, legal liabilities, trauma awareness, and the 5 capitals. Hopefully that X-ray is looking a lot clearer now. You are armed, you are equipped, and you are ready to go do faithful work on the convention floor.
As we close, I want to leave you with this final thought based on our dive into the source material. When a massive church structure focuses on building castles, it ultimately isolates itself behind thick walls of bureaucracy, generating paper but no actual power. But when it focuses on releasing capital spiritual, relational, physical, intellectual, and financial effect, it transforms local communities. As you pack your bags and prepare to vote on these amendments, ask yourself, what kind of capital is your local congregation sitting on right now that could be released tomorrow, regardless of what happens at the convention?